Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This weekend I'm taking my oldest daughter fishing. I thought what better way to surprise her this weekend than with her very own tackle box. So I decided that we're going to make a video of just kind of the basics I think like a starter tackle box should be. And it don't matter if you're 4 years old or 7 years old. If you're going to put your first tackle box together for fishing panfish and fishing from the bank in general, just kind of some things that I grew up fishing with, and some things that I think work pretty well, pretty easy for kids to do to catch fish. The first thing, I think that we're going to need, as far as tackle wise, is good bobbers. Whether we're using it to suspend a jig or something of that nature, or live bait itself, I like using a slip bobber. For the kids setup, I use like a rubber sinker stop. We also use these like for Texas rig punch baits, things of that nature. I think that these are a little bit easier for kids to put on. Then I have one rigged up right here. This is actually the Thai style bobber stop. This is what I like to use when I'm bobber fishing with live bait. For me, I can make it a little bit tighter than what the rubber stops are. So if I'm fishing for bigger fish, I don't have to worry about constantly resetting that bobber because they pull it under so hard that it slides that up. That's really the only difference that I've noticed with it. I don't like the clip-on bobbers because this doesn't put any kinks in the line. It doesn't put any line twist on. And I just think that for sensing and reaction, I just think a slip bobber is a little bit better. That and, versus your ball style bobber, if this thing floats flat, that means it's not against the stop a lot of times, and that means that you're set too deep. So, I mean, for the kids, it's easy for them to see versus the clip-on ball style. If it's flat, you need to move your stop down a little bit. Get your hook up off the bottom. Like I said, suspend the jig and live bait. That's kind of what I use these bobbers for, and the bobber stops. When it comes to hooks, for live bait, especially for panfish, I like just a normal plain shank. This is a size 6 Eagle Claw. Nothing special. Pretty plain Jane. I will go to, especially with really young kids, I'll go to a wire hook. That way if they do snag on something, you can bend it out. But I also pay attention to the wire diameter. Like even on these are a smaller diameter. Traditionally, especially with kids, you're going to be using a lighter rod, and they don't have the leverage. They don't have the arm length. A lot of times we use shorter rods, so they don't have the leverage to set a really thick hook. So I like to keep it fairly thin. Yeah, there's a possibility if they hook onto a monster fish that's going to straighten out, but I would rather have them hook more fish than be missing, littler fish and things of that nature because they can't get the hook buried in it. So yeah, like I said, you can use the bait keeper style. For me, the way I thread live bait on, I get it up over the eye of the hook anyways. I don't think it makes a difference. The bait keeper ones don't hurt anything, so if you have the bait keeper ones, run those. I just feel like these ones without the bait keeper on them, they're a little bit stronger of a shank. They don't just snap off because they don't have the barbs on it, but they're still a soft enough bend that you can straighten it out without having to go to a wire hook. These are kind of, I feel, the in-between. Just your normal plain shank hook is in between a wire hook and a bait keeper as far as hardness. You can still bend them a little bit, but they don't bend out, if you set the hook on, a bigger fish. So that's just kind of my normal everyday panfish hook. Bait wise, as far as not using worms, crickets, grasshoppers, I use grasshoppers a lot. This gulp power bait, whatever you want to call it, whether it's for trout, crappie, even when I do catfish and things like that. I think these baits work really good, especially for somebody that is going to carry this in the car, or if you're going on a long family trip and there is a fishing spot along the way and you don't want to have to worry about a cooler with worms or anything of that nature. These actually work really good. They do catch fish. Um, I remember when I was littler, my grandpa always told me these were gimmicky. Once I got using them, um, I don't. They're not gimmicky. They do work. They do catch fish. So I think something like this. Once a kid learns hooks are sharp, don't put your finger on the point. I think these are really good for them. They're not slimy like worms. They just thread a couple on a hook and you're good to go. So I think that this is another add to on the bag. They say crappie. I've caught bluegill and red ear and things of that nature on them. And if you're gonna go trout fishing, I use the paste or whatever. It's the same stuff, but it's not pellets. And I'll use like a number. Actually, I got one right here. This is my box, and some of this stuff is gonna get put in the kids box, just because I have so much of it. I don't need it all in here. So this is like a number. I want to say this is a 12 or a 14 treble hook. This is what I use when I'm fishing for trout. I don't know how good you can see it. It's little. When I'm fishing for trout in the streams, this is what I use, and I'll put power bait on it. And then that power bait floats. I'll put about 8 inches, one split shot, just enough to hold. And this will float about 6 inches off the bottom, and the trout just go crazy over it. But anyways, back to what I'm adding to this box. The next thing is these chubby mini mites. I was probably 9 years old. I went out in the lake in Wisconsin with my uncle fishing, and it was the first time I ever used one of these mini mites. And as a kid, they're really easy. You almost can't fish them wrong. You can just cast them out and reel them in. You can bounce them off the bottom coming back. You can reel and pause, let them drop to the bottom, pop them up and reel them back. I do a technique with these that a lot of times I'll do with like a marabou style jig, where I basically hold the rod up, and the whole time I'm coming back, I'm vibrating that rod, and that makes that just kind of bounce all the way back. And I think that you put that in front of a fish, it just drives them nuts. So I always think this is a good go-to first artificial bait for kids. You can take the bobber and you can use this to suspend it. Kids like reeling stuff in. They like seeing the bobber move. Keep an eye on the bobber. So you can just have them cast it out there, and every few seconds, just tell them to jerk on the bobber a little bit, reel a little line in, and it'll take this and it'll actually pivot it up and down like that. And bluegill, crappie, bass. I've caught catfish on them, you name it. They just seem to like these a lot, and I think it's a good start artificial bait for children. Or if you've never fished before and you want to fish artificial for panfish, I think that's a good start. Probably the next artificial bait that I would say is going to be, these are little paddle tails. I have some Mr. Twister curly tails, grub style baits, whether it be on just a normal jig head or a swim jig head, or again with the bobber. I think these are another really good start to artificial bait. Again, you can just cast them out and reel them back. You can cast them out, reel them halfway back, kill it, let it fall to the bottom, pop it up, and reel it back the rest of the way. They're just a very easy bait. It's hard to mess them up. If you want to get somebody learning how to fish artificial baits, and they'll learn the speed of reeling. If they reel real fast, they'll learn that they might not be biting that way. If you tell them to slow down, they get a bite. They'll real slow the rest of the day. And my thing with fishing with kids with that is they're always antsy. They always want to be doing something. So if they're reeling and reeling and reeling, and the fish actually want something that's just sitting, they'll get bored of reeling. So then you just put this on a bobber rig, suspend it, and then it's just enough interaction for them just to pop that bobber back. So again, this is another really good introduction to an artificial style bait. Another artificial bait that is good, and they've become more popular with the crappie stuff, is these little stinger shad style swim bait, nail tails, whatever you want to call them. I got a couple different colors of these. They work really well. Again, you can suspend them with bobber, you can bounce them off the bottom, you can reel them back. Most of the time I use these wire hook jig heads with them. These are 32nd ounce. Again, especially with these, if you're going to be fishing around brush, I make sure that I get the wire hook ones so I can just bend the hook out, and we're good to go. Or you fish them with a round ball jig head. Depends how you want to fish them. But these are also really good artificial bait. Just normal split shot, lead split shots for your bobber rigs and things of that nature. Excuse me. That is what the majority of what I would put in a starting tackle box right there. There are a few things that I'm going to add to this. Just to kind of just different options. This is a MEPS. This is a number one MEPS. When I was younger, this was my go-to smallmouth creek lure. I mean, I've caught a lot of smallmouth on this style MEPS, whether it's a gold blade or a silver blade. It all kind of depended on, it seemed like water clarity. But these are very good smallmouth, and I've caught a lot of crappies on them. I'll put a couple of these in the box. And again, it's easy for them. Cast it out, pop it once, reel it back real slow, just so you can feel the rod tip just barely vibrating, and that's the perfect speed. And it's easy to teach kids that. So that's another good starting bait that it's going to end up in this box here. Other than that, I mean, that's pretty much the majority of what I'm going to put in here. I'm not going to put like any small crankbaits or anything like that in here. Just I want them to get these basics of, if we're going to jig the bottom, feeling what the bottom feels like. If we're going to be doing a retrieve, feeling what speed you need to be at. Getting the fundamentals down before we're worrying about a small jerk bait or of things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, this is the curly tails that I'm gonna say is probably a good starting point for kids. It's a really small, just a panfish curly tail. Again, you'll catch bass on these. Actually, this little guy here fishing on lock and dams, I've caught walleye, sauger, pike. I mean, just on that little thing. If the water conditions are right and the fish are eating, I mean, it's a nice small bait. Kids can manage it. It's just a good starting point to work yourself up to bigger lures. One last thing that I want to kind of go over is the rod setup that I use. So for children, kids, younger kids, I'm not a big fan of a bait spinning Zebco style. That's what I started on. But once I kind of really got into fishing, I learned early on how to use a spinning reel. And I think that it's beneficial to just start with a spinning reel. If you can, it takes a little bit, but if you can start on a spinning reel, it's going to advance your fishing knowledge so much faster, especially for your children. When you're trying to get into fishing and you want them to enjoy it. There's a few tricks to these, and I'll go over that quick. But this is a 5-foot ultralight. This is kind of one of my all-around poles. I've caught a lot of trout with this thing, and I've caught big catfish with this thing. This is kind of my all-around. I have it set up a little bit heavier line than if you were just gonna stand at the end of a dock and fish for bluegills, but that's by design. A lot of times, if you get a combo, it's already rigged up. It's probably gonna have 8 pound mono on it, and that thing is sat in a warehouse. It's been transported across the ocean. That line is junk. Pull the line off. Watch the videos on how to put new line on. They're all over YouTube. Um, find a reputable source to watch and watch how to re-spool line. And I'm telling you right now, it's going to save a lot of heartache. This line on here, this rod has 8 pound braid on it to a 8 pound fluorocarbon leader. The braid I feel on these casts so much nicer, and the fluorocarbon is invisible under the water. I mean, they can't see it, and it's got a little bit of stretch to it as well. It kind of helps from overpowering the hook. Like this one has a wire hook on it, but it's such a soft tip that you're never going to overpower this hook. But if it does get hooked to a stump or something of that nature, this line is heavy enough. I can actually grab the line, pull on the line, it'll straighten out the hook, and then I can either take pliers, bend the hook back, depending on what kind of fishing we're doing. I don't do that a whole lot. But my main thing is I don't want a bunch of line out in the water and a hook stuck to a stump, because then a guy comes and he's bass fishing by that stump, and now he hooks your line, and he's got a mess. I like to minimize that for the next guy. But like I said, this is a braid to fluorocarbon setup. It's a little bit more advanced than somebody starting out needs to have, but in my eyes, this setup here, learn how to tie a good knot. This setup here will in theory never lose a fish. And when you're trying to get a kid started fishing, if you have the cheap junk line that comes with a combo from the big box stores, you name it, if they catch a decent fish, there's a good chance that that line's going to break, and it might not be anything of their fault. They might have played it out good and everything. Just that line is just brittle from being cold and hot, and stored in a box and things of that nature. And it's not very good quality line to begin with when it's new. So going to a quality line is just going to save a lot of heartache. And when your kids are starting to catch fish, they're going to actually get the fish all the way in. They're going to be able to hold them, take pictures with them. And those things are the building blocks for getting more into fishing, more than just casting and reeling. The fish is what they're there for, obviously. So in my eyes, take the extra time, do a little extra research, have the guys at, whether you go to Cabela's, Bass Pro Shop, Shields, spool up good line for you on the reel. Watch a few videos on how to tie good knots, so that way you're not having any break off issues. Test your knots. If you're new to tying these style knots, tie it 5 or 6 times in your house and really pull on it. I mean, pull on it harder than a big bluegill will. Give it a good 5 pound pull, and if it doesn't break the knot, your knots are good. But yeah, that being said, you don't need braid on here. You could go really good, I would say really good mono, really good floral if you want. This is just my personal preference, just because I know that we're never going to have an issue with it. Braid casts a little bit better. It doesn't shoot off the reel. We don't have to worry about wind knots, things of that nature. So that's kind of my setup on it. So basically, that's an overview of, more my kids' tackle box. Kind of what I suggest if you're trying to get your kids into fishing, or you're interested in learn how to panfish yourself. That's what I would start with, is kind of these basic baits, your bobbers and your hooks and things of that nature. Your rod, you don't need a high dollar rod if you're going to go pan fishing and just fishing from the end of the dock. You need a decent rod and good line, and a good reel that's not going to break. I think this combo here, I've had this for a long time. This is a Shields rod and a Fluger reel. I want to say now, at the time, it was a lot cheaper. This, like I said, is a few years old. Now, this combo here, or this rod from Shields, I think is $45 or something like that. And this reel is like $38 or something like that. So yeah, it's a little bit more than your average combo at like say Walmart, but it's higher end quality. It's something that's going to do its purpose for a long time, and that you're not going to have to worry about, having defects with the eyes, the gears inside the reel breaking, the line cutting in. It's a brass line roller here. Just those little things kind of make the fishing experience better. It's a little bit more durability, and it's a little bit smoother. You don't have the line wear. Just little things to think about. So I would say if you were going to start fishing today, or you wanted to buy this setup for your kids, right here, this is about $70. That's with this tackle box and all this. And you could probably get something comparable to this and be out of the store probably with line. I would say you could probably get something very comparable to this for $70. So for about $140, you'll have for sure something that will last bait wise and rod and reel, at least a couple years. For the average person, if you only fish 3 times a year, this is 10 years of baits. For $140 out the door with everything, that's a pretty cheap way to bring some happiness to somebody's life. So yeah, that's just my quick overview of what I think a beginner's tackle box should be. If you guys like this, subscribe and like, and we're going to be doing some more kids fishing videos coming up. Thank you guys.